I think Vandy covers.
I bet you're right, actually.
They
That
got a
might be the
score.
only question. There we go.
All right, waiting for this bar. We are now live. Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Around the League from UGAsports.com. I am Dane Young alongside Brent Rollins from Pro Football Focus and the Hall of Fame head coach, Jim Donnan. And guys, we've got a little bit of a lighter week in the SEC with some teams being off. But before we get to that, we have to do what we do every week, and that's be accountable for our picks the week before. A lot of people in media don't take the time for that, but we think that we should. In terms of picking games, we were all 2-1. We all picked the same teams, but we all did pick LSU to beat Auburn. Just off, Coach. Just off.
Yeah, I mean, whatever Gus said to him before the game was good, and whatever Coach O said wasn't too good. But I was really surprised at the way Auburn really offensively and defensively, just if they play like that, they got a good shot the rest of the year. I don't know that they would do against Alabama or A&M, but they look like a totally different team Saturday.
Yeah, and you did mention, Coach, that TJ Finley, freshman quarterback, would probably struggle in that environment. He definitely did. Brent, I don't know if I've seen a quarterback kind of look as confused or at least set up the other team that well, at least since Jared Garantano against Kentucky a couple of weeks ago.
Very much so, and it was just inaccuracy. I mean, it was, and then you get a little pressure, fumble, and then it's quick on you like that. 2 back-to-back defensive scores like that. It was. And then it just snowballed from there. And it's just hard to, like quicksand, especially if you're a freshman on the road, first start, and it didn't end well.
So where we're at with our picks, Brent and I are tied at 12-6 on the season. Coach is 11-7, and not going by the spread. I really don't know how impressive that is for 3 guys that claim to know football pretty well. But you know what, people, I think we're giving you some decent advice if you choose to bet on us.
We're in a pandemic, man. We can't we're closed in. We don't get the outside world too much. So, but that's pitiful picking by the old coach. I mean, I've never been this bad on picks, but hopefully I'm about 13 months pregnant and I'm overdue to start doing something.
Your bold prediction did come through last week, I think. You can kind of measure how you want. You said Texas A&M would run all over Arkansas, and it was definitely a balanced attack that put a lot of points up on the board. Jimbo Fisher's got to be happy with what happened in that game.
Yeah, I wasn't as specific as I thought I should have been when I say run all over them. I meant to say they were going to get after them pretty good and, get after them like hopefully Georgia's going to get after Florida. But definitely Arkansas is playing on fumes emotionally, and it's just hard to do it every week. I mean, they got one this week too that we'll talk about here in a little bit when they go against Jim Chaney's boys from Tennessee's offense. And Coach Pruitt hopefully got that D-line going now. He's had 2 weeks to be coaching them.
Brent, you said James Cook would get more than 100 total yards, and by the skin of your teeth, my friend, 101.
101. Yes, I saw it. His last, I think it was a late carry or a late reception or something. I was like, yep, there it is. All right, finally.
Yeah, and I said that Najee Harris would have a couple of career highs. I just thought he would be a feature piece of the offense, and they didn't need him to be necessarily, though he was very productive. It just wasn't a career high kind of game. That's last week. Let's turn the page to this week. Our marquee game of the week, there's really no doubt in the SEC that the SEC East is on the line this week with Georgia versus Florida in Jacksonville. Georgia pretty beaten up on defense after a physical game against Kentucky. Florida still kind of recouping from some of the COVID-related things that we've seen from their team. So, Coach, I know we got into a lot of this on Tuesday on our Georgia-centric show, but Georgia versus Florida, it doesn't get much bigger than this in the regular season, does it?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically an elimination game to get to SEC East because when you play somebody head-to-head, then that team has to not only lose one game, has to lose 2. And I don't see either one of these teams losing another game after this unless it's, you could see Kentucky play Florida pretty tough because they are physical, and A&M has already beat them. We'll have to see about LSU. And then our schedule lightens up a little bit. But, we got to play Missouri, who's playing with a lot of confidence. But, a couple keys, I think, is Pickens playing for Georgia is huge because – the secondary from Florida's given up over 300 yards a game, and Georgia's got a really good chance to air it out against these guys, mix up the play action and the run game. And then defensively, some of these younger guys are going to have to step up. Chris Smith coming in for LeCount, Carter coming in for at defensive line in there for Jordan Davis. And just overall, I just think the big key for anybody analyzing this game is not to downplay Georgia too much because of what we haven't done, and not to overplay Florida because of what they have done, because I just don't see this Florida defense being anything like we've seen in the past. And, certainly getting that one guy back is going to help them, but they got a lot of holes on that defense.
Brent, what have you seen from Florida on defense? Because I think most of our viewers are pretty aware of what the Kyles on offense are doing.
Very much. And we talked about it a little bit, I think, a couple weeks back, but they're tackling. Like at that point, we were talking about it before they had the break because of the COVID issues, but they were the worst had the worst tackling grade, most missed tackles in the SEC. It got better, a lot better last week against Missouri. I think they only missed 8 tackles, but still yet in terms of the overall conference, they're 12th of 14 in tackling. So, a few weeks of practice helped that a little bit. But now you have somebody, you're going to lose Zach Carter because of the suspension for at least half the game. He's, I think, had played the 4th most snaps for their defense. Now they did get back Kyrie Campbell, so that kind of equals out a little bit, but still yet depth is something that they don't have a lot of on the defensive side of the ball. So, it's one of those things where obviously you look at the units, the matchup of the game in terms of units of prominence. It's Florida's offense versus Georgia's defense, but it's the alternate that probably will, like Coach said, will probably ultimately decide the game. How well does Georgia play offensively against their defense?
Coach, one of the things that we have discussed, and I think is one of the talking points for this game, is the career records Kirby Smart versus Dan Mullen. And so before the show, I looked it up to make sure that I was accurate in what I was seeing. Do you know the career record? Now, this is as coordinators or as head coaches between Kirby Smart and Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I think it's 11-1.
It is. I've got 10-1. I could have missed one somewhere. Maybe you're counting this year already. I've got 10-1 as it is.
Maybe it's 11 total, but I know they did beat him one time when he was a coordinator at Florida. But
yeah, that was the 2008 SEC championship game. And that Florida team was one of the best teams in the history of college football.
They were, well, he's 0-3 as a head coach, I know. And then, the rest of the time, however, how many times Kirby was a D coordinator there at Alabama, and they played a couple of times in the SEC championship game. So but of course he played at Mississippi State. How many years was he the head coach at Mississippi State?
Yeah, it was 7 matchups, and Alabama went 7-0 against Mississippi State in those years. And I looked it up because I was curious about the points per game that Mullen's offenses get against Kirby, because I knew the first point people would make is with the talent difference at Mississippi State compared to Florida, or when you compare that to Alabama and Georgia.
You stats, man, but I'm going to have to disagree about one thing. I think Kirby beat Florida the year before in the championship game when he was the coordinator and Mullins was the coordinator at Florida. So I think he's got one win over Florida as a coordinator too. So that would make it 11.
Okay. So I'll have to double check on that then.
Just to make sure. My memory's not as good as it used to be, but for some reason I think
I trust Coach on this, actually.
You probably should. Well, from the numbers I have, when it's 11.6 points per game that Dan Mullen offenses get against Kirby Smart defenses. At Florida, that was 17 points a game, whether that's as a head coach now or including as a coordinator. Actually, I think that's just as a head coach at Florida just now. That didn't include the 30. So 17 each of the last 2 years at Florida, and Mississippi State against Alabama, and then the 1 year against Georgia, 9 points per game. And so Florida's offense, as great as Dan Mullen has been in developing quarterbacks, it's not turning into points always against Kirby Smart defenses, and that may be the problem for Florida.
Yeah, the other thing is 20 out of 32. That's what Georgia is on third down in the last 2 years against them. So that's a pretty dang good percentage, even if it is against Third and Grantham.
Brent, is Third and Grantham real? Do the numbers dictate that?
Very much so. And what's interesting so Coach brought that up, and those, the 2 points that you were just talking about were the first 2 pieces that I wrote down for this game. First one was third down. Last year, you think about the game, Jake Fromm won that game on third down last year. He was 10 of 13 for 119 yards and a touchdown. And I put this on Twitter the other day. Stetson right now on third down has a 79.8 passing grade, 78% adjusted completion, his best numbers in any situation. Whether it be first, second down, third down, clean pocket, pressure, blitz, no blitz, any of that. He is best on third down. So, given those issues, it's definitely something to watch for and a thing for the game. The other part is, talking about Kirby's defense against Dan Mullen's offense, being able to pressure Kyle Trask. And last year, Georgia did it very effectively. They pressured him on 19 of 37 dropbacks. Now, the interesting thing, though, is a lot of times, we think of Lanning and Kirby in the past, a lot of blitz-heavy looks. Well, they didn't do a lot of blitzing last year and still got to him. They only blitzed him on 9 of 37 dropbacks. So they were getting a lot of pressure without blitzing. And I think for this year, that becomes even more important because of the explosiveness of Florida's offense and the sort of presence that wasn't there last year of Kadarius Toney.
And here's the thing that Florida doesn't have that Alabama does. I mean, Alabama has the 2 tight end principle where they will keep an extra tight end in to protect and things like that. Florida's a 3, 4, 5 wide receiver team that has exposed edges. They don't like to put Trask in there tight, to be a blocker. Why would you? The way he can catch the ball. So the edge rushers are going to be critical in this game. Anderson, Alargy, how are they going to rush these tackles? And can these tackles take them on one-on-one? If you see Florida going to some tight formations, then they're worried about our rush because they're going to give up a little bit on spreading it out to try to make sure they can launch the ball. If that happens, then we can get more double coverage on Trask. To confuse Trask and get more double coverage on Pitt.
That's a good point, Coach, in terms of the edge rushers, because if you look at the injured players from Georgia or the guys that are trying to overcome injury, it's not the edge rushers. Azeez Ojulari's there. Adam Anderson's there. You've got Nolan Smith that, you talk about a guy that's probably 12 months pregnant, Coach. Nolan Smith is one of those guys at the edge that we've seen him around the quarterback, but he's not quite there just in time. And I think that it could be a potential breakout game for a guy like him, Brent.
Yeah, and one of the things when you think about the injuries, when you think about Rochester being gone, more than likely Jordan Davis being out for this game, this is the game where the likelihood of those injuries being an impact is more of just depth and snaps as opposed to true impact in the game. They're going to Florida throws the ball 60% of the time. They're going to throw it a lot on Saturday. And I could see a world where you have Trayvon Walker, Jalen Carter, Malik Herring, guys that also play on the edge, end up being on the interior a lot and maybe getting more of a pass rush from the interior than you typically do with some of those guys. And because Florida throws it on early downs a lot too.
Yeah, really good point. One of the things we've utilized all year is our third down pressure package when we put in specialists, so to speak, rushing the passer, playing the draw, spying on a guy, all that. You can do that on first and second down against Florida if they've spread you out. And if they've come in with a heavy formation, it's hard to play that because you just get outflanked. But I look for us to play a heavy dose of dime against these guys where you have that extra defensive backs, where you have both Campbell and Webb in there at the same time. They can play the run on the edge extremely well. I mean, Stevenson and Webb, they can play the run pretty well from the star and the dime position and take some pressure off those two safeties that won't have LeCount back there.
And who was one of the heroes of the Georgia-Florida game in the last couple of years? Tyreek McGee in that same position that you're talking about, Coach, where the ball is going to be around there. Can you make a play? He had an interception and I believe a forced fumble in the same game against Florida. That really set up Georgia's offense. Brent, one of the things that Alabama did so well against Georgia was just accurate passing. It's one of Mac Jones' biggest assets this year. What have you seen from Kyle Trask in terms of his accuracy?
He's taken a step up this year, especially in terms of making the more difficult throws, but still yet, they get a lot of yards after the catch. They set up a lot of, in terms of throwing to receivers that are open or have, a couple steps of separation. Mullen's offense does a great job of creating that. So it's not like he's consistently having to make difficult throw after difficult throw. And then obviously the pressure part comes into play. He drops, 20, 30%, right around 20% in terms of completion percentage if you're pressuring him. So, in terms of his accuracy level, he's not on Mac Jones level from an accurate standpoint this season. But, with the way their offense plays and with the way, you've seen him play in the past, this possibility is there. But I still think they're going to get pressure on him. And I think it's not going to be at that quite of a level.
Yeah, I think the bottom line, and you brought it up about tackling, can they tackle Cook in space? Can they cover Pickens? Can we tackle Tony in space? Can we cover Pitts? So those are big question marks right there. And the team that's got the answer is going to be the one that wins.
I tell you, Cook being Georgia's leading receiver against Kentucky. And there weren't many opportunities to pass just in terms of time of possession, and Georgia just didn't have many drives. But Cook being the leading receiver, that's something you don't see at Georgia very often. I know DeAndre Swift was a great receiver of the football as well. You kind of saw it with Sony Michel in cases. Getting that amount of action, I think Todd Monken's realizing the potential that all of us have really talked about. How can you find ways to get James Cook the ball? And if you have that combined with what Zamir White's doing between the tackles, it seems like a pretty good formula, Brent.
Well, it's players. I mean, it's who's your best players. Get your best players the ball. One of the things we've talked about is Pickens, and the fact that when you look at, he's got 13 catches in the year and he had 12 in the bowl game last year. So finding ways to get Pickens and Cook the ball, they're your best two offensive playmakers. Because what's interesting about what Florida does is Pitts. I mean, he's their best offensive player. People haven't been as part of the way they line him up in so many different places. He's gotten at least 8 targets in every game this season. So he's their best player, and they're going to find ways to make sure he's involved. I think you see that hopefully more so this week than any week with Pickens.
If you want to continue the conversation with Georgia and Florida with us, you can watch us right here on the same YouTube channel for the UGA Sports Watch Along show presented by Bud Light Seltzer and Athens Ford. We will be us three. Brent is taking the chair from Rodney DeBolsey, who's taking the trip down to Jacksonville. We'll have some coverage from there. So we'll talk about this game real time, and Coach can tell you what he's seeing. Brent can tell you what the data has said and if it's coming to fruition. All I know is it's Georgia and Florida, and crazy things happen in this game, and I'm excited. So you can come and watch that with us. We do have 3 more games to get to in this show, and so we want to give them the proper time. Tennessee and Arkansas. Sam Pittman, I thought Arkansas actually had a solid performance against Texas A&M, considering the roster deficits. You can say Arkansas's maximizing the team that they have. Evens out a little bit right now, Brent, with Tennessee coming to town and the Vols in a world of hurt, but off of a bye week. Do they kind of get their program back on track?
They better hope so. Because when you look at the last 3 weeks, last 3 games, that's 3 consecutive losses by 81 total points. It's not been a fun 3 weeks for Tennessee. So you would hope they would sort of come out with a very much angry mentality, but I actually think I look at this game more from the Arkansas perspective, just because I really think they can get to 500. They would have to go 3-2 obviously to finish, and they play Alabama, so they would have to go 3-1 against Tennessee, Florida, LSU, Missouri. I think they can do it. I think there's a chance that they can do that, and it's one of those Florida LSU games that they can win, and I think they win this week. They're getting production from every level. They finally got Rakeem Boyd back in the game. He had 100 yards rushing. He had 88 in the year before that. So getting that, they have Mike Woods, they have Trey Burks, Hudson Henry. They have playmakers for Franks. He's using his legs. I actually think Arkansas wins this game, and it's at home, and they haven't been home for a while. So.
Coach Felipe Franks has just been solid for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, they've really built their offense around him and done a good job, except for trying to salt that Auburn game away. That'll harm them the rest of the year, not trying to make that first down like they should have. But I think the big thing here is, as Brent alluded to, Tennessee, it's showtime here. I mean, if you're going to have a Tennessee walking pony, you better get that sucker out there this week, because let me tell you something. You lose this game, you still got Florida on the schedule. You still got some tough A&M. You got some tough games, and they're going to really struggle to get to 500. I think it'd be the coach of the year for sure for Pittman if he ends up 500. But Tennessee has better players right now. I mean, they have a head start on them, and it's all going to get down to whether Garantano can throw the ball effectively, because they're going to gang up on the run. That's what they do. And if he can throw it effectively, they should win. I'm going to give Tennessee. When do we have to pick them, later in the game, or when do we pick the game?
We'll do that at the end. We'll do it at the end.
All right, so that's good. I know I got one on this guy because I'm going with the ball here. Let's go.
Hey, Coach, can you explain this to me, though? Because with Tennessee's offensive line, I just expected the Vols to be really proficient running the football, because I know how good those guys are. I know how big they are. I know how good they are in space. Why has Tennessee struggled in their run game?
Well, they've gotten behind, and after the Georgia first half, they got behind and, really didn't try to run the ball. And then inexplicably threw 2 touchdowns in a row to Kentucky. And it was a catch up the rest of the way, and that's hard to do against Kentucky because Kentucky keeps the ball away from you. And then, the other game, just not very effective. I mean, I don't understand it either, but I think they'll have some success running the ball on this Razorback team. Odom's really coaching around his players. I mean, he plays down and distance, and if he can get you behind the sticks, I mean, they can do some good things with their pass defense. But Chaney's really a master at game planning. I think they'll really attack this defense, not because it's weak. It's just because it's so systematic in what it tries to do, stop each play and then find a way to get you off the field. So I think they'll probably be a little more patient with the running game against Arkansas.
Brent, do you have anything else on Tennessee, Arkansas? Because I know there's a quarterback you want to talk about in the league.
Well, I mean, just in terms of piggybacking off of what Coach said, this is when you look at Tennessee's schedule. If you don't get this game, you've got A&M the following week, at Auburn the following week, then you get Vandy, but then you still got to play Florida. That's not good in terms of feeling good about yourself for the season, if in terms of looking at that. So they desperately need this week, just in terms of looking at the totality of their season.
But look, on the bright side, Tennessee fans, because of the eligibility situation in the COVID year, Jarrett Guarantano can come back yet again for his 14th season, if you'd like
6
him
years.
back. Yeah, the two guys, and this is my transition to you, Brent, leading into the season, Jarrett Guarantano and Kellen Mond seemed like they had been there forever, but this season their trajectory is going in completely different directions. I know you've got some nuggets on Mond.
Completely different directions in general. And we talked about it last week, I think, in terms of less is more with Kellen Mond and what they're doing. They're not asking him to get a lot of yards in the running game. They're really distributing the running game with the backs. He's not running it as much. And in terms of throwing it, when you look last week against Arkansas, he had a 94.6 game grade. That was his best game grade ever that he's had at A&M. And what's interesting is, okay, you think, oh, he had some good games. He's had some decent games before. He'd only been above 90 in a game twice, and those were one was against an FCS opponent, and the other was against a non-Power 5 opponent. He'd only been above an 80 game grade once in 4 years against a Power 5 opponent. And then he went and did what he did last week against Arkansas. So he is just sort of escalating himself. Now, we talked about the injury to Caleb Chapman at receiver for them. Hezekiah Jones, 5 of 8 balls for 47 yards, played his first game in over a year and a half. He missed 2019 because of an Achilles, hasn't really had a setback and hadn't played, and finally got on the field against Arkansas. So that helps them. Because they needed somebody with experience and somebody they could count on at receiver, in addition to Aniyah Smith. So, and the tight end Weidermeyer. So A&M's looking good. And for this game specifically, though, you think about that, and Coach always talks about this. How do you handle success? How do you handle it when the world's telling you how great you're doing and how great things are going? Because now you go to South Carolina at night. Strange things happen at Bryce Williams at night, so you never know.
Well, and coach, it's a little bit of a tough matchup in terms of those receivers for A&M because you're not going to find many teams with a cornerback duo like South Carolina has. Now, I know their roster has some deficiencies in other places, but when you're talking McQuamu and you're talking Horn, it makes it really tough for the opponent's passing game.
Definitely. Those two guys know how to cover, and they've had a lot of success, and they're very confident. The big deal for South Carolina is, what are they going to do offensively? I mean, they make a lot of yards. They just don't score a lot of points. I mean, they keep the ball a lot, but they don't make any explosive plays. I mean, everything is, just methodical. You watch that end of the game against Florida where they were trying to score. So if they can get some explosive plays, they got a shot against A&M. But I think A&M is really trending. If there's a stock report, you'd have to say it's a blue chip stock right now. And if they can continue to, play around their strengths, and Mon is, we told everybody the first show of the year, give him some help. He can't win the games by himself, which he tried to do for 2 years. Now he's doing it with everybody else, and look what's happening. And I agree, getting that kid back is going to give some explosive plays to him, because you hate for anybody to get his Achilles like that, but he's certainly going to help him. I'm glad we're not playing him.
With South Carolina being a possession team, that last game of the season when South Carolina plays Kentucky, that game may be over in about 45 minutes, just the way that they go.
They're going to have an extended warm-up in that period so they can get the 3-hour window in.
Brent, what's changed with Texas A&M? Because, from last season to this season, it just seems like a different offense or a different confidence. Is it just that Jimbo Fisher's been there long enough and the talent on their roster is finally showing?
That, and they're playing well along the offensive line. Like we talked about, they're asking Kellen Mond to do less with his legs. He's getting the ball out quicker. Even when you look at, and he's getting the ball out in the middle of the field, and he hasn't really done that. A lot of times it's been more on the edges. And he's really driving the ball into the middle of the field and throwing the ball well there against Florida. Like when you look at Florida's lone loss in the year against Florida, between the numbers, Mon was 19 of 22 for 274 yards and all 3 of his touchdowns. So really attacking the middle of the field more so, letting the running backs. Isaiah Spiller's playing great, leading the conference in terms of yards after contact per carry. So it's just a combination of elevation everywhere. Sort of rising tide lifts all boats, and they've elevated in each area a little bit, and it's made a big difference.
Here's the thing about A&M that just really perplexing, but is also pretty much saying in the whole affair, is the fact they looked so bad against Vanderbilt in the first game that you're saying, what the heck's going on? Then they played Alabama fairly well, really made some critical plays, and we're playing them fairly tight, played them kind of like Georgia did, but then they got blown out, and then they put it together against Florida. And since then, you don't necessarily think they played the toughest schedule in America, but they, part of building a program is beat the teams you're supposed to beat, like Brent says, and beat them decisively. They haven't had any nail biters, and they really have. That game last week was comfortably in hand. They got 2 cheap scores at the end of the game. Give them credit for keeping fighting. But, I think A&M, to me, after us and Alabama won too. I think they've already beaten Florida. You got to say they're the 3rd best team in the league.
Well, and I think, too, that you look at the SEC West and you see LSU's defense can't stop anything. And so LSU's taken a steep step back from, well, obviously last year, but even normal LSU. And then Auburn's all over the board. Maybe they just need to play LSU every week. Someone had to kind of step up and take that 2nd spot in the West and maybe contend for something over there. And good on A&M for being ready and equipped to do that. Because sometimes it is, like you say, Coach, you got to play the schedule that's in front of you and win the games that you can. And, beating Alabama's tough, but A&M played about as well as, I think that they could against a team like Alabama at the time. One team in the West not playing quite as well, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. First time in Mike Leach's coaching career that he is coming off of a shutout game, but nothing kind of heals that wound more than waking up and playing Vanderbilt. So I think you called this the pillow fight of the week, Coach.
Yeah, and I'm anxious for my cohort here who does all the stats to give me some stats about these 2 teams, because I'm pretty much helpless on it. And I think I should give my time. It's like some kind of Senate debate when somebody says, hey, can I turn my time over to Brent Rollins? Because I think he can certainly decipher this game a little better than I can, because Mississippi State just looked completely. I mean, Alabama is not the greatest defense in the world, but they pitched a shutout against these guys. And seems like the recipe for stopping them, just drop 8 and make them throw the ball in front of you. They don't have Hill anymore. So I'm going to turn my time over to the great senator from West Virginia, Brent Rollins.
Unfortunately, I think his internet just dropped out for the moment, which is really because I was going to yield my time to him as well. He's hopping back in here.
He left the room there. He's kind of like some of those senators from West Virginia. They have a tendency to cut the power off when they have to really get. Are you getting enough coal over there at your place there? You know, that West Virginia coal?
I don't know. Can you hear me? That's the question.
We've got you.
We both.
Okay, good. You know, you guys took care of Mississippi State Vanderbilt, right? We got that taken care of, so we can move on to picking games, all that.
We yielded our time to you. You've got the whole game.
Break it down for us, bro.
I got nothing, and you know the reason
And then he drops out again. All right, that's the internet. You know, that is the kind of performance that Vanderbilt and Mississippi State deserves. We can't even keep the connection going long enough to actually chat it through. And
let's get on to the next one here.
That's the first time. That's the first time I've actually had issues with this whole new hotspot thing that I've been rolling with and allowed us to do the video. So
blame Vandy.
We tried to give you some love there and give you all that time, and you're not going to get it because we're on a tough time scale, and you only got 5 minutes per senator. So you lost all the time that we were giving you. So.
All right, the spread is 19. Can Vanderbilt cover the spread? I think those are the people who are going to be watching this game. Those are the only people who are going to be watching this game, unfortunately.
I think they'll cover.
I think they'll cover.
That's the intrigue of this game.
I mean, I'm not sure if Mississippi State can score 19.
They haven't been able to.
They haven't scored that many points all year after the first 47, have they? I mean, what's the most they've scored?
And maybe that says as much about LSU at this point. The fact that Mississippi State came in and set SEC records against Bo Pelini, because everyone else has done pretty well against Bo Pelini's defense too. Yeah,
they have 30 points total. Outside of that first game, they have 30 total points. So I think Vanderbilt might have a chance to cover this game.
Well, I think that game is on at the same time, right, as Georgia, Florida, or close to it. I think it's a 4:00 kick. I'll have to double check on that. Either way, I mean, if a tree falls in Starkville and it's Vandy playing, does anyone hear it?
Well, one thing we can do, we can cut off our game and go to that, because there's going to be a lot of intrigue on it. Nobody really wants to see what's happening on Georgia, Florida. That'll be a lot of people watching that Vandy game. And I just don't see Mississippi State's going to have to generate a lot more offense. And, Vanderbilt usually plays pretty decent on defense, although last week they looked terrible against Ole Miss. Ole Miss just ran up and down the field on them. The guy hit 90% of his passes, and the other guy, the one receiver, Moore,
he almost beat Grayson Lambert's record.
Yeah.
No one can ever touch Grayson Lambert's record, period. It's always going to be in the lure. All right, let's get to our picks here. And I don't think any of us would pick South Carolina over Texas A&M. So that's the game that I said I think we're all going to pick the same. And so we can leave that be. Let's do it. Let's pick Vandy and Mississippi State. Coach.
With or without the spread?
Let's go without.
I'm going to go with the Bullies just because it's hard to see Vanderbilt winning, but it's going to be a tough game to watch. I think just void of talent.
Brent,
Mississippi State would be the pick, and what's interesting is how many highlights. Like if you click on the highlights, how many highlights are there? I don't think there are going to be many.
What if this is the Mike Leach game? What if? Because then I want to see the highlights.
Yes.
Maybe. I don't see it happening, but I am picking Mississippi State with as little confidence as you can have in any pick whatsoever. Tennessee and Arkansas. I do think that there is some intrigue in this game. And Brent, it sounded like you had an early lean towards Sam Pittman.
Yes, I'm taking Arkansas at home.
I'm going to do the same thing. And to me, this is a toss-up game, Coach.
Hey, at least I got a chance to catch up with you guys. So I'm going with the Vols. I think just because so much about what the Arkansas doesn't have right now and the Vols do, I think they can control the line of scrimmage, set up some play action passes. But if things start to go south in that game quickly, that momentum for all those Arkansas fans, even though it's going to be a limited amount, and the fact that Tennessee's going to say, here we go again, Arkansas could jump on them hard. So get a good start, Tennessee, and I think you win.
I think I trust Kendall Briles more than Jim Chaney at this point, and that's what I'm coming up with in that pick. I could be proven wrong completely.
What has Kendall Briles ever done compared to Jim Chaney?
I'm just telling you based on how the offenses have looked this year, and I think that Tennessee actually has more offensive talent, but not producing at the same rate that Arkansas is.
Okay, but Kendall Briles has got a great future ahead, but I mean, he really they won at Baylor. His dad was running the show, but his stuff as an offensive coordinator has a pretty much losing record. Although he did pretty well at Florida Atlantic, he did pretty well there.
I got to credit somebody for the turnaround I've seen from Felipe Franks. And maybe it's Felipe. Maybe he's just matured. But to me, that was as much of a wild card as was in college football and quite steady at this point. So whatever that marriage is, it's working. Game of the week, it is our marquee game, and I think it was kind of understood it was going to be this way, Georgia versus Florida. And, Coach, I always know that it's a tough position to put you in a spot to pick a Georgia game, but I know you're confident in this one, so I don't have any problem putting you in that spot.
Yeah, I just feel like Kirby's got the mojo on Mullen. I feel like that this is a good matchup for Georgia's offense. Brent did a good job of detailing how's the offense going to do against the defense, because everybody talking about that one versus typical like the Alabama game, Alabama's offense against our defense. But I'm a little bit higher on Georgia's offense than a lot of these pundits. I think Pickens getting back will really be big for him. And a lot of that's just because I've watched Florida's defense. Just amazing to me that and maybe they will improve better. And I know Coach Grantham will coach them hard over this week, and they'll be ready to go. But it's hard for me to believe that's a Florida defense that I saw against Ole Miss and A&M and some of those teams. And, of course, Missouri, they played better last week, but Missouri is not Georgia. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm picking the Dogs.
Brent, Georgia, Florida.
Well, there's one area that to me becomes key as much as any in this game. And that is Georgia's ability, and we've talked about sort of Georgia's offense versus Florida's defense, but I think Georgia's ability to defend the run with 6 or fewer defenders in the box, because Florida's going to spread you out. Florida runs empty sets more than anybody in the SEC. They run bunch formations more than anybody in the SEC, almost twice as much as anyone in the SEC. And they're not doing it to run like Kentucky did. They're doing it to throw. And thus you're going to have 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers in the box for most situations and not have Jordan Davis. So defending the run, because the last 2 weeks or the last 2 games for Georgia against Alabama, they gave up 5.7 yards per carry with 6 or fewer defenders in the box. Against Kentucky, they gave up 5.3 yards per carry with 6 or fewer defenders in the box. Florida, number 2 in the SEC in yards per carry with 6 or fewer defenders in the box at 6.6 yards a pop. So if Georgia can stop the run with that sort of light box, I think, and completely make it one-dimensional, much like they did last year, I think you're going to see Florida's offense kind of get bogged down. If they let them run the ball with that light box, then they're going to be able to do whatever they want. They're going to set up their game to Pitts and Tony and get those guys supremely involved and sort of have their sort of mercy on Georgia's defense in a way, I think. But again, for the game in terms of picking it, I don't think that happens. I think Georgia stops them. I think it's a kitchen sink game for the Georgia offense. Whatever Monken's got in his back pocket that they've been practicing like once or twice a week in terms of plays that, hey, this is the one we're going to use against Florida. those pop out this week. Those things happen. I think Georgia barely gets the win.
Good analysis there. I look at this as which team can have more explosive plays and chaotic plays. I think Florida's more likely to get that with offense. I think Georgia's more likely to get that with defense. I think that's kind of where everyone is on this matchup. And in a college football realm where offense is proving to be king, I don't see Georgia getting the plays needed. I think Florida's going to win this football game. And that's not a want to happen or anything like that. I just think Georgia's got a lot of things going against it offensively right now. And until proven otherwise, I need to see an explosive attack from Georgia. And I haven't really seen a lot of that consistently in 2 years.
And it was hard for me. Like I'm Mr. Offense is King guy. And here I am picking against the better offense to this point. So I think you're right. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be an intriguing game.
I do think it'll be very close. I do think both teams have quite a few flaws, if I'm honest. And so, both teams have a lot of work to do before whichever one gets to Atlanta to see what Alabama has in store by that point. Let's finish up with our bowl predictions and then get out of here. Brent, I'll stick with you. Do you have a bowl prediction for me this week for any of the 4 games?
We talked about the edge defenders and their importance in the Georgia-Florida matchup. Adam Anderson's only played 13 snaps in the last 2 games.
Wow.
I think he doubles that. I think he plays at least 25 snaps. I think he gets at least 4 quarterback pressures and a sack.
25 plus snaps, 4 QB pressures, and a sack. All right, I like that. That would bode well for Georgia if he's getting all of that. I'm actually going to stick with Georgia, too. The narrative in this game is that Kyle Pitts is one of the nation's best receivers and the nation's best tight end. But I think that people are going to walk away from this game seeing Georgia's weapon at tight end. I think this is the Darnell Washington emergence game. And so I don't think he's going to outperform Pitts because he's that young. That's just not going to happen. What I'm going to say is that Darnell Washington has 75% of Kyle Pitts' production in that game, which would just be an incredible output from a freshman that hasn't got a lot of looks. But I think that that's the matchup that Georgia can exploit. Coach, do you have a bold prediction for me?
I mean, but they got McKinney in there too, so we'll give you the credit if between them they get 75%.
I'll take that.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that Georgia has 5 plays over 30 yards in this game. I like the explosive power of Cook in the open field. I like the busting some runs at the line of scrimmage with White. I see a lot of deep passes to Pickens. Of course, they could do the same thing to us, but I would say we get 5 plays over 30 yards in this game.
Guys, if all 3 of those things happen, then I think Georgia wins easily. So if we're all right, then Georgia's in for a good Saturday. If we're all wrong, then it may go the other way around. Coach, any final thoughts for the week?
I think it's just a game that means so much to everybody. I think the team that goes in there and plays relaxed and doesn't – it's not easy to be relaxed, but doesn't play tight and make mistakes. Like Florida last year started out with 2 delay of game penalties or timeouts and got their signals confused and just got off to a bad start. And they were behind so much that, 21-0 going in the 4th quarter. So I just got to see which team can really take the bull by the horn. It's going to be interesting to see if Florida wins the choice, will they take the ball? If Georgia wins the toss, then Georgia's going to take defense first. So Florida could end up with the ball regardless who wins the toss.
Brent, any final notes from the doc?
I think it's just going to be fun. It's going to be a fun watch. It's when you think about the big picture of your season, you're exactly where you want to be. You're here. You win this game. You control for Georgia's perspective, you win this game. You control your destiny throughout the rest of the season in the SEC East, and you set yourself up to improve each and every week to play Alabama. If you're Florida, you're in the same boat. You win this game and you set yourself up for that same exact thing.
It's a good show, guys. This has been Around the League from UGAsports.com. You can watch Georgia versus Florida along with us here on this YouTube channel or on Facebook or on Ronnie Nabolsi's Twitter. Any of those good things you can watch along with us. Georgia versus Florida. We'll give you live commentary and analysis as it happens. For head coach Jim Donnan, Doc Brent Rollins, and myself, Dane Young, this has been Around the League from UGAsports.com. We will see you next Thursday.